my life really was worthless because the people who should have loved me the most, my own flesh and blood, like my own family, my parents, my own mother, thought my life was so worthless she tried to take it. I was born in Seoul, South Korea. I'm adopted. And when I was about 13 years old, my adopted parents, they sat down and just shared with me more about my adoption story. And so up until that point, I had understood that my birth parents in South Korea, they weren't able to keep me. And so whenever I was born, I had an adoption plan made for me, and then I was placed with a foster home family for a year before I was adopted and brought over to the States. That was kind of the narrative that I had learned for the most part growing up. When I was 13, though, my adopted parents, they thought I was old enough to know a little bit more about my story. They told me about some information that they had actually learned after I had been adopted. They were going through paperwork and they found a piece of paperwork from the adoption agency that explained that my birth mother in South Korea, actually 2 months into her pregnancy with me, had a DNC abortion. And then 3 months later, she realized that the abortion had actually failed. And at that point, that's when I was then kept. And then I was born later on October 7th, 1995. And I was placed then with a foster home ministry in South Korea before I was adopted and brought over to the States. There was a lot of shock in my life knowing that that was a decision my birth mother had made. There's a lot of anger that they would make a decision like that. I have a deformed arm. I've had that since birth. Whether or not a direct cause of the abortion, we're not positive. But I blame the fact that I had that deformity on my birth parents and the decisions they made. I struggled at this time with a lot of just self-image and self-worth issues. So from 13 to 16, there was a lot of anger and hatred working through that. Like on the outside, I was like, oh, I've forgiven them. I've moved on. I'm okay, or whatever it is. But there's a lot of struggle underneath the surface still. And when I surrendered my life to Jesus in high school at 16, there were some overnight switches. Not necessarily what I did, because I was already doing a lot of the right things, but motivations, sense of worth, security, value. My senior year of high school, I started sharing my testimony. And when I did that, something that happened time and time again after I shared my story is I would have post-abortive women come up to me afterwards, and they'd be in tears. They'd be just very visibly shaken, and they would share with me, for whatever reason, they would share with me that they had had an abortion in their past. And the Lord used that to really soften my heart towards post-abortive women. Because up until that point, I had demonized them. I thought they were the worst of the worst, the scum of the earth. I thought it was people like them who made me the way I was, broken and less than others, just like my birth mother had. But as the Lord changed my heart, and as I heard these stories, I was reminded of the reality that they're people too, who God loves, who God values, and who feel the brokenness of their sin, who feel the brokenness of the decisions that they have made. And so as I heard story after story after story of women and men who had made those decisions in their past and how it was haunting them years, decades afterwards, the Lord really used that to soften my heart towards my birth parents. By sharing my story, my main goal and my main hope behind sharing my story is that people would see Jesus. Because at the end of the day, He's the answer. And here's the reality. We live in a very broken, fallen, messed up world. And I believe abortion and everything surrounding that is the greatest evil of our day. Because we take what should be most protected, what should be most sacred, what should be most valued, the unborn life, what should be the most safest place in the world, the womb of a mother. And we've made it one of the most deadliest places. And so in sharing my story, my hope is, yes, to advocate for the unborn, to, yes, bring healing to those who have made those poor decisions. But ultimately, my goal is for people to come see Jesus, to have a relationship with him, to know him, and to see the gospel change their lives. And as the gospel changes the lives of people, it then changes the lives of the world around us. Because that's what we need. Jesus, nothing else.